Earlier this year, I participated in the 2024 GameMaker's Toolkit Game Jam, where participants were tasked with making a game in 96 hours. This is not a how-to game jam guide, but a devlog of my own personal experience. Step 1 was determining what kind of game I was going to make. Like all games in the jam, mine had to adhere to the phrase built to scale, so something about size or scaling. I frankly have no idea how to manually resize objects in Godot, the engine I wanted to use, so something to do with size. And it couldn't be too extensive because of the limited time. While I have programming experience, I only started learning Godot this summer, so I wasn't that experienced with it. So I spent the first day simply thinking of ideas and not programming anything. My first big thought was a platforming game on a math graph, with formulas as the levels. And maybe you could flip gravity to change what axis you walked on, but I didn't really want to design levels, so I hit on my next good idea after about 4 hours of thinking. Tetris, but all the blocks are different sized squares and they can't be reshaped. You know how when you do a line clear, the rest of the tetramino stays on the board? Well, my squares wouldn't do that. Either the whole square would clear, or you couldn't clear a square unless you were clearing every line it was a part of. I'd figure that out later, after I'd already programmed some basic mechanics. I knew that I wanted my squares to move along a grid, and since Godot doesn't have default art assets, the first thing I did was make a grid and some squares. I know you should use really basic art until after you program stuff, but this is going to be my only pass at art anyways, so might as well make it usable. With the grid and squares done, the next step was moving the active square. The square basically moves twice, once along the physical grid to show the player where it is, and once along a virtual 2D array that keeps track of the square's location in code. The square drops at a regular pace, and when it senses something below it, the square stops, and marks all the cells that it's in and on the virtual array. This lets the next square check if the cell is filled, and will hopefully let me delete the squares on from the grid. I also deactivate a square when it lands to spawn and activate the next one. After some finagling, I managed to get this drop function to work for every square sized 1 to 3. Basically, I just anchor each square into its top left corner cell, adjust the sprite coordinates, and check for empty squares below the bottom of the square instead of just the next cell. Then it fills in every cell it should cover. With the dropping working, I was about 48 hours into the jam, counting for my sleep schedule. Now I just had to do line clears, and the tricky part, making the squares that aren't cleared fall into their proper place. Unfortunately, as you may have noticed, I have no way to track what physical square is in what virtual cell. I can easily check if a row is cleared and clear it virtually, but the physical square is still there, which doesn't affect the game any, but is not good. I'd also have to clear the rest of the square, not just the row that is being cleared. It took a bit, but I figured out a functional, if inelegant, solution. Starting at the bottom, I check if each row is full, and keep track of all the cleared rows. Then I'd go through the rows that are cleared and clear each cell. For 2 and 3 squares, it's more complicated though. When filling in the virtual array, I mark each cell with a number corresponding to what square filled it in and what row that cell is in relative to the square. So the first time I see a 3.1 on a cleared row, I know to clear 3 cells above to the right, and 3 cells below to the right. This is why I have to check all the row clears first, in case clearing a square like this unclears another row. Unfortunately, even with all that math, it still doesn't give me access to the physical square on the screen. So what if I just got rid of it? Once the square lands, it becomes inactive anyways, and can't move until the row clears. So does it even need to be physical at that point? It needs to be physical to drop. It's so much easier to just reuse my pre-existing drop code than to make new code just for falling, but while the rows aren't being cleared, when the squares aren't falling? So that was my solution. When a square landed, I'd remove the physical square, and place the square sprite into the top left corner the cell was in. Offset physically so it appears in the right place on the screen. Now when I clear a cell, I just clear the sprite as well, and bam, it's gone. Then when I need the squares to drop, I use the same process I use for clearing rows to find where every square should be on the grid and place one there physically, clearing the virtual array in the process. These new squares are inactive, so they can't be moved, but will drop and turn into virtual squares normally. Is this process elegant? But it works, and that's good enough for this game jam. With just a few hours left, I added in a score system, some instructions, a game over message, and some music, sourced for free from Microsoft Clipchamp. I tried adding sound effects, but they didn't work for some reason, and I was out of time. So I uploaded my exe file to itch.io and went to bed. I had completed my first game jam. Except, I forgot to upload the PCK file, which means my game was unplayable. God damn it. Oh well, since the game didn't work, I spent the next week adding some more features that I didn't have the chance to, like better graphics, sound effects, which I made using virtualpiano.net, and a main menu. I also got the game to run in browser, so it actually works now. Cube Drop Cubed, now available on itch.io. All in all, it was a fun, if somewhat stressful experience. I know how to actually upload games now, so hopefully that oopsie won't happen again in the next Game Jam. I am planning to do it all again next year, and it was fun proving that I can crank out a game in a weekend, but we'll see how things are going then. August 2025 is a long way off. In the meantime, I've been Raventry, and thanks for watching.